You are listening to Cemetery Confessions, the world's #1 goth talk podcast.
Hello and welcome back to Cemetery Confessions. This week we have special guest DJ Mistress McCutchan and DJ Batty Von Bats from Toronto. If you aren't in Canada, though, you may more likely know them from their new podcast, Cat vs. Bat, on which they discuss music, news, and political issues as they relate to the industrial and goth scene and their own experiences, and of which you guys just celebrating your 1-year anniversary. So congrats on that. Very, very cool. As always, I'm the Count, and I'm here with my co-host Trey. Hello, Trey.
Hello, Count. Hello, Mistress McCutchan and Batty Von Bats.
And let's just jump right into it. We'd like to start just to get your origin story. You know, tell us your journey into goth and what that was like for you.
Who would you
I
like
was going to say
start?
you should start. You've got the longer history than I do.
Sure. I think where I've entered the goth scene started when I was a teenager and was partially due to the environment I grew up in. I'm actually from the States. I grew up, don't laugh, at the Jersey Shore before I moved to New York City. I know. Hey, big hair and big hair. It all comes together.
Yeah.
But where I grew up, there was a pretty strong alternative scene, and all the freaky people used to hang out at the boardwalk. And we had, of course, MTV, and there was a show called 120 Minutes back in the day, where it was a really good resource for finding out music and kind of hanging out with that crowd at the boardwalk. And there were regular meetups of these people. We didn't call it goth back then. It was just sort of this collective of freaky people. So you had sort of these punks, a lot of skinheads, and what would later then be called goth. When I was 18, moved to New York to go to art school, started going to the clubs there, got really immersed in the music. I've always been very much into the music, and started DJing at the end of the 90s. And that's kind of the skinny of how I got into what was goth.
My entering into the scene was a little bit later than Mrs. McCutchan's. I didn't really get into the scene until university, right around my 19th birthday. I originally grew up in rural Ontario, so that was a very culturally monoculture in a lot of ways. This is all pretty high-speed internet, things like that. So I didn't have any experience with that at all until I moved to Ottawa. I went to hit a gaming store that was near to where I was living. And the first person I met when I walked in there was the lead singer of a local goth band called The Haunting. So I got to know Kevin very well, and through Kevin got to know the rest of his band and other people in the scene. And in Ottawa, there was a huge crossover between the goth and industrial scene along with the gaming scene. Vampire the Masquerade was massive in the 90s, just right, and that was a real gateway. And then through a guy that we call Slippery Chris, he was a big tape trader, so he had a ton of videotapes. Actually, is what he was, a videotape trader. So I got to know Chris through Kevin. Passed me a ton of videos with KMFDM, Ministry, Pop Elite itself, and stuff like that. So I got into that, and then the local scene as well. That's my roots.
I have a distinct memory of going to my community college one night and seeing a group of nerdy kids in like makeup and cloaks just sort of wandering around and occasionally talking to each other. And I was like, what is going on? I don't know what it is, but I like it. And I asked somebody and they're like, oh, we're playing Vampire the Masquerade. And I was like, what is this? This It sounds amazing, and that sort of began my love affair with vampires and spooky stuff. And but I did want to ask if you guys if you remember the experience of going to a goth club for the first time and what that was like.
Oh my God. Going to a goth club for the first time was a really awesome experience in that you got to check out other people who were dressed really beautifully. You got to hear all the music you wanted to hear. Because when you first start out, you have your gateway bands that get you interested. And for me, it was The Cure and Depeche Mode. And then there was a mixtape that seemed to float around our local scene that had the Sisters of Mercy on it, and Dead Can Dance and Coil. And that's where you just kind of dug even deeper and deeper. You'd go to the record store and investigate more music. And then hearing it out in a club, I'm trying to remember which was the first club I went to, if it was either the Pyramid or if it was the Bank in New York. Because every Thursday night there was a retro 80s night, and it was definitely very goth heavy. I believe that night still goes on, and it's a very NYU student crowd nowadays. And then there was the Bank, which had goth nights Friday and Saturday. And Patrick, who is still spinning to this day, was spinning in the basement. And yeah, I mean, it was really great to kind of be among your tribe and to be able to discover more music and be able to meet people that were like-minded.
Eventually ended up at the club. I think my first probably club experience with the scene would have been a live show, going to see The Haunting. Playing, like, you get to know the people, you come out and support them. It's the way it's supposed to work. You support your friends when your friends are doing some good stuff. But I was pretty lucky in Ottawa. At Zaphod Beeblebrox, DJ Leslie had her night running, and up until it shut down, it was the longest running industrial night in North America. So we had a lot of stuff, and like Leslie was a very, very well respected internationally for what she did through the 90s and into the 2000s and even into 2010s. So there was always a very, very strong scene. And at the time, like it was Tuesday nights they ran. So that's part of the secret of being an alternative night is be on a weeknight where nobody wants to go out. So you can keep going. But I remember getting off work.
That was it.
And, I get off work at 9:00, walk over to the bar 10, 15 minutes later, and you'd walk in on a Tuesday night, and there'd be 100, 150 people in the bar. Wow. It was nuts. Yeah, I think people forget how big industrial was in the mid 90s. Like, it was massive.
Well, that was when, I started getting it. I had sort of a weird, delayed, prolonged experience with getting into goth, but it was very much that sort of Apoptymok Berserk and VNV Nation and Covenant kind of thing, because it was so. I think I was getting a lot of my music from torrents because I didn't have access to actually buying music anywhere because I was still living at home, and I was in a sort of very conservative Christian house. But a lot of what I was finding was that music, and so that was definitely my exposure. So if that was seeping into this like super Christian, sort of isolated experience that I had in high school and middle school, that really speaks to how prevalent that was, I think.
Yeah, well, there's definitely that. But I think it's interesting you mentioned like VNV and A-pop and stuff like that. Like that entire sound skipped Ottawa's clubs.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, like when everybody else was dancing to VNV Nation and A-pop, Ottawa was dancing to stuff like Terror Fact and Kevorkian Death Cycle. Like Ottawa is, and it still is, a very, very heavy scene. Like that industrial metal and like rhythmic noise and really aggressive heavy music. That's still Ottawa. Like there's not, it's not to say there's not people there who don't like VNV and A-pop and stuff like that, but that is not the dominant sound in Ottawa and never was.
I do, and Trey, you could probably speak to this better than me, but I remember there was period of time where in Chicago, and this, I'm sure there's still a sect of people into this, but it was the heavier the better. It was like noise and manufactura and Ivardensphere and just like this straight like electro kind of thing was all you would hear anywhere. I don't necessarily know when the future pop synth pop stuff kind of came in and out of vogue. But what was your experience? Because you were obviously going out before I was.
Well, as far as the Chicago scene, I think I was about the same time as you because I wasn't going out. Well,
Okay.
I mean, I was going out to the Chicago scene early while I was in college, but it was like when I'd be home for the summers, and I really only went to Nocturna, which back then was down on the Smart Bar and was almost exclusively goth and darkwave, and it didn't really have much of the industrial side at all. So I think I missed the part in the Chicago scene where it was ultra heavy. Neo was relatively heavy, and they had their heavy nights, but I wouldn't necessarily go so far as to say they were exclusively your harder electronic dance, electronic industrial kind of stuff. Because they definitely played their share of A-pop and B&V and that sort of thing. So they probably did lean a little bit more towards the heavier industrial when I was going there. I know Chicago definitely had its heyday, with the industrial metal side of things, since Wax Trax and all that was, situated here. Even though Wax Trax, had many other things going on than just industrial metal, but within our subculture, that's what they're most well known for.
Yeah. Before my time, though, I don't have any experience to speak to that, but well, let me ask you guys this, because I never, sticking on sort of origin stories, I don't really get the opportunity to ask this kind of thing or this kind of question, just sort of about why you decided to start a podcast. What was it about doing a podcast as opposed to other content you could make? Why did you feel there was a need, or was it just a hobby kind of thing? Like, what brought you to starting the show?
I think what kind of started that all off, we were laughing about how starting a podcast is today's answer to, hey, let's start a band. And we used to spend so much time sitting around and talking about music anyway. We kind of thought, sure, we could record these and actually start a podcast. And part of it, I wanted to be able to inform people about music and to push things that we liked or bring attention to things. But then we found out that people really liked our stories, which I was like, who the hell cares who we are? That we're just kind of, here we are in Toronto doing our thing. And yet people seem to really like our stories. So the podcast just kind of seemed like a natural media to work in, as opposed to doing a blog or doing a YouTube channel.
Yeah, I know. Going back to the sort of to that idea, I do remember my early experience in goth circles, especially before I was old enough to go out or had the ability to go out anywhere, was this sort of going to somebody's house until, hanging out until 3 a.m. and drinking and just sitting around and talking about literature and philosophy and music. And like, that was the goth experience to me, is this sort of, I don't know if intellectual engagement might be a little grandiose, but just, having these deeper conversations about life and be trying to be as spooky as possible while doing it. And so I think bringing that over into this sort of medium kind of at least resonates with me as sort of on a level of my experience with goth.
Yeah, I mean, as a teenager, I know we spent a lot of time in diners, hanging out, talking, drinking coffee, and smoking cigarettes to all hours of the night, which is why seeing the goth kids on South Park, just, I die. I'm like, somebody's done their research.
Yeah. I remember the first time I went into a Denny's and the smoking ban had gone into effect, and I was like, what? What am I going to do with my life now? This is smoking and drinking coffee is so important to my goth experience.
Yeah, well, when the smoking ban came into New York, I thought, that's it. It's going to fuck all the nightlife. This is going to be awful. And then I remember taking a car in from Brooklyn to go DJ a night. And I can't remember what month it was, but it wasn't quite that warm out yet, but there were just people out on the street everywhere on a Saturday night. And I
Hmm.
thought, wow, something's going on. The city's totally hopping tonight. No, it was just
Yeah.
everybody standing outside to smoke. So, which was an improvement as a DJ because I didn't come home having to take a shower and Febreze all my
Uh,
clothes because I'd jump into bed and my partner at the time be like, "You stink, go wash
yeah.
your hair." And I'd be like, "Yeah, you're right, this is gross." So it was nice when the smoking ban came in and it didn't entirely like fuck
Well, for
everything when
me,
it
the smoking
happened.
ban allows me to do what I do. Like if there was no smoking ban, I wouldn't be a DJ.
Yeah.
Plain and simple.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Like I've got severe asthma. I've got an eye condition, so I've got to wear hard contacts all the time. And even just being at movement, in Memorial Day weekend, which is open air, but there's enough concentration of people smoking and vaping outside that it affected my asthma and affected my eyes. Like after 3 days, I couldn't stay the entire day on the Monday. My girlfriend and I, we had to bounce,
Mhm.
I guess around 8:30 on the Monday, which worked out pretty good given that a storm blew through at 9 o'clock and soaked everybody that was there. So that was okay. But yeah, like even just going as a club goer, when I was going, when they were smoking in the clubs, I was only there hour and a half at most.
Mm.
And there were some weeks there was no way I was going with my health.
It's interesting to think about how just in my lifetime or my experience has gone from smoking is like this central experience to what I do and the community I'm with to like nobody really does it anymore. I mean, people obviously still smoke, but I've quit, and I think a lot of other people have stopped smoking, and it's not really this sort of social glue that it used to be.
Well, I think for a lot of goths, smoking was a very visible sign of nihilism, and you don't need such a visible sign of nihilism
Mm.
when you have to look around the world and see the world's burning, and we're got a bunch of idiots in power who just want to throw gasoline on the fire.
Well, that or the other outward sign of goths, because I think this fell in line with a lot of alternative culture, is that I'm pleasantly surprised when I find out how many people are vegetarian or
Mm.
vegan, because that was a whole different thing to reject what was normal and to have a different point of view as far as, well, I don't believe it's right to eat animals or to wear them or to, X, Y, and Z. So, because when I meet people and they're like, "Oh, I recently went to Boston and ended up rooming with DJ Zvetchka and Andy Harriman." And it was funny because I was mentioning a place around the corner. I was like, "Oh, I'm dying to go get breakfast there because they have vegan pancakes." And she thought I was mentioning it because she thought I knew she was vegan. And I was like, "No, I'm vegan. I'm all out for the pancakes." And I was like, "Well, at least, hey, we're both vegan. We know where we can find
Hmm.
food." But a lot of folks, again, having this unconventional thing about them. Although being vegan or vegetarian isn't as freakishly weird as it used to be, because 20 years ago it really sucked.
That did kind of play into what I wanted to ask about next, and around this idea of how much time and dedication that you're putting into the scene and the industrial scene and the goth scene, running a podcast, being a DJ, having a full-time job, even continuing that later into life. um it sort of it belies what I would assume is some deeper connection with the community that resonates with other parts of your life, and engenders this desire to do all this extra stuff. And so I'm interested, what is the connective fiber of this thing that is so meaningful for you as an individual?
I would say for me, I don't want a boring life. I I think it's really sad when people have these very conventional lives of get up, go to work, come home, eat dinner, watch TV, go to bed, and rinse and repeat every day. And when we create events, I know that we have in mind the kinds of things that we want to see and what we want to do. When I first started DJing, I was an ethereal DJ.
Mm.
I my DJ mentor is his name is Carlos, and he used to run a show out of NYU called Theatrum Ethereum, and it was all dark ambient, ethereal, and I really liked what he was doing. I spent a lot of time hanging out at the radio station with him and got him to teach me how to DJ. And I was really interested in that kind of music and thought, wow, it's really funny. This is not something you hear out in public. You don't hear this out in clubs. There's a very good reason why you don't hear ethereal in a dance club, because nobody dances
No,
to
it's
it.
just because everybody hates me dancing.
Yeah. Well, it's funny when you have all this ethereal sort of Dead Can Dancey world fusion inspired, because everybody has a certain way that they dance. Because I always joke around that Gothic belly dancers started when the first one heard some Dead Can Dance in a club and started doing the moves and having sort of these like swirly girly arms happening.
Mm-hmm.
But ethereal and dark ambient didn't have a place in clubs, and that was something I wanted to change. So we started doing events together, and we found a venue that was willing to let us have this experiment. So there were a couple events that I put on with Carlos at Mother, and we started from there. Like, I wanted to do events that I wanted to see. I remember booking bands that I wanted to see. So maybe part of it is a little selfish. In 2013, we brought Sex Gang Children to Toronto because that was a show I wanted to see. And that, I think, is a big driving motivator. Is this is something I really enjoy doing, and I want to go to events that are different. I think I have a different point of view and a different perspective of what I can offer. And if people like what they see, they come and support it, and then we keep doing more. If they don't, then I have my answer. At least I had a good time while I was doing it. So, but yeah, I think we're just both very driven because we get these ideas and then we have to run with them. So, because otherwise ideas are like farts and they just kind of come and go in the air and that's it. And some of them smell really bad. So it's just like, no, we have this idea. Let's go. Let's make this thing.
Yeah, I think definitely the same way. I've always been a doer and organizer. Whether it was running live action games for a decade, and then from there I took that skill set into promoting. Very, very similar skill set actually, running live action games versus running a club night.
What systems or
I
what
ran
games were you running primarily?
MET for 12 years. Almost 12 years. Yeah.
Wow.
I guess,
Cool.
19 to 31 is when I ran those games. And I got to the point I had no stories left to tell, but I still had all these things I wanted to do. And my work schedule had changed, allowed me to start going back out clubbing again. And Halloween, the year I turned 32, fell on a Tuesday. And Zaphods had booked in like a touring act. So, the Scene Lost or Halloween night. So we did a house party at my place for my birthday in September. And me and my buddy got drunk and said, well, we can't let this happen again. We need to start promoting. 3 months later, we threw our first show. And, originally my goal was to be there as a promoter, as an organizer. Then got into DJ and just absolutely loved it. My buddy Danny DJs under the name Crash Override as a drum and bass and hardstyle DJ, and was running a very successful rave promotion company in Ottawa. And he got me to come over one day and just got me practicing. He says, He goes, DJs are unreliable. Someone's going to screw you one day and you're going to need to fill an hour slot. You got to know how to do it. So I did that. And then we decided that, it's going pretty good. We should do something and try to get all the different parts of the community together, get the visual artists and some live music and stuff like that. And so we threw a show 9 months later, did our first live show with just some local bands. Now we're pretty lucky. Our local bands included Encephalon and Memmaker. That's a pretty nice first show to be able to draw on those two bands.
Yeah.
And Mistress McCutchan actually came down and DJ'd that show for us as well. We had like a goth rock arts space upstairs. We had some live music and industrial and EBM downstairs on a 2-floor venue, and it just kind of went from there. Did that show, and then Glenn Love contacted me saying he never played Ottawa, I'd love to come play Ottawa. I'm like, who the hell's Glenn Love? Do some digging, find out who he is, find out who he knows. Some of the same people I know, so I ask about him. Mentioned to my buddy in Ottawa. I was like, oh, Glenn and I have followed each other music for years. I'd love to do a show with Glenn. So I said, yeah, let's do it. You want to play with Synchro? I was like, what do you mean Synchro? Yeah, well, he's in Ottawa. He goes, I thought he was in South Africa. Well, no, he moved to Ottawa a couple of years ago. So did that, and all of a sudden I became a live music promoter as well, right? And I just kind of keep doing it. I'm not doing as much as I was, which is good. Like, I can't be doing 2 weekly club nights and putting on live shows every 2 weeks and working a day job. Easy to do when you're 33, a little bit harder to do when you're 43. But like for me, what I've always tried to do is create something that's, relatively small but long-term sustainable, that has more community than scene appeal, where there's a real life to it. Because that meant a lot to me, having a community when I was 20, 21. Moving from a small town like a couple hundred people to Ottawa, also an area of around 1 million people, and having that small community of people that kind of at least get where you're coming from was important to me. So I keep trying to do that, and I keep telling some people, if you can replace me, I'll be happy to come out and just spend some money, but I'm not going to go away for crappy nights. Enough crappy nights out there. I wish people would stop supporting them. I try to do something a little bit different, a little bit more community based, and go from there.
Yeah, and I mean, music is so important to both of us that we want to just be able to keep putting it out there so that people can have something different and realize that they don't have to accept the same old, same old.
Yeah, I was doing a little contemplation on the question of why is goth so important to me briefly before the show, and I think for myself, having been sort of I guess inculcated into such a conservative and a culture that taught me to be homophobic and sexist and arrogant and that kind of thing, having access to goth spaces and other goths sort of resonated with me in ways I didn't fully understand even until maybe recently, is by sort of giving me examples of because I'm bisexual, I'm non-binary, and I'm deeply interested in what sort of engenders behavior and how we interact, and sort of big philosophical questions and all of these kinds of things that I didn't understand and wasn't able to explore where I was. So having that outlet and that connection, even if it was a lot of times distant through the internet or forums or through occasional people I'd meet on the street, it was sort of teaching me about who I was before I knew who I was, and giving me the space to explore that, and that was so invaluable and so meaningful for me, and continues to be important to me, and that I think for me that's why I'm so passionate about trying to do what I can and doing the podcast and all that kind of stuff, because it was so personally meaningful.
Well, it's one of the things the scene's always been good about. It kind of allows you to be okay with not being okay. You can start figuring yourself out. And it's not to say there's not shitty people in the scene. Like there's shitty people everywhere. But there's a lot of people that actually have a high give a fuck and will take care of people and help get you involved and help you find yourself. I remember reading an article, this must have been probably shortly after Columbine, talking about self-harm and in the scene and stuff like that. And what the psychologist who wrote the paper was saying, or wrote the article was saying, was that yes, there is definitely a higher incidence of people who have self-harm in the goth scene, but once people get integrated into the goth scene, that stops. The incidence goes way down and kind of regresses back to societal mean. And what they had found by talking to people was that all of a sudden they found people who got them and had been there and had done that. And all of a sudden you're now interacting with people who get how you feel, and you now belong. You're not an outsider. You may not be the mainstream, but you're not alone. And that sense of community is really important.
Yeah, it makes a big difference to find your tribe and to find your people.
And I think that finding the tribe and finding your people, I think in some ways that's why the scene is always very, very aggressively protective when they see outsiders trying to co-opt what we do. When someone who is a wolf starts putting on the sheep's clothes, that's when people get really hurt. And it is something that I've seen. Like, the uniform means something, and that's how you go and find people. That's how you find people that are like you. That's why band t-shirts are just so damn important, if nothing else. If I go out and see somebody wearing a Joy Division t-shirt or a KMFDM t-shirt or a Hyde t-shirt or a Boy Harsher or whatever, I go, we share likely some common experiences and common philosophical beliefs. And when people start wearing these shirts as a fashion statement without understanding the significance of it to our community, it's problematic. And I think that's why we get angry.
So,
well, sure, because all these negative tropes kind of come up as far as what people think goth is if you're not already part of that scene. And I mean, it's kind of like we know and recognize there are various looks that are part of what can be considered goth fashion. And people get really funky impressions that, some girl is wearing PVC or has some funky harness on or a collar or whatever. And then somebody who's on the outside may assume that, wow, all goth girls are really freaky. And that's when you end up with these weirdo tourists that come into the clubs that are looking for freaky goth chicks because they think that they're going to get somewhere with that. And that's where some funky impressions happen. And it gets a little, it can be problematic. And yeah, that's why shoulders come up and we are protective of, like, are you, who are you? And do we welcome you or do we not? Are you here because your intentions are you're interested in the music and you just want to talk to some people and everything's cool? Or are you here because you're kind of a predator?
Well, that probably gets back to just sort of the general ethos of patriarchy and how men view why women dress the way they do. And the classic example is Jordan B. Peterson saying that women wear blush because they're subconsciously signaling that they're sexually available. And that's kind of the, what the culture that we live in, is that women are meant to present themselves conservatively, and if they're not, that means that you get, men have some feeling of ownership over them and over their sexuality, and that's just that whole fucked up kind of. And I hope that's changing, but there's still a lot of that going on.
Yeah. I find that the majority of women that I know dress for other women,
Yeah.
or they dress for
Yeah.
themselves.
Yeah, I would.
I know
definitely
I
agree
dress
with
for
that.
myself.
Yeah. And I don't remember where I saw this, but someone was talking about a prison women's prison documentary, and there were women that were doing YouTube tutorials about how to sort of DIY makeup in prison. And these are straight women, and they're going through a bunch of effort just to put on makeup, and they're not doing that because they're trying to attract men. They're doing it because it has some resonance with their expression of themselves as an individual.
Absolutely.
I do sometimes question, the scene's progressive values, given the number of flyers that people still put out that are just women in cat suits or latex,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Because that's one thing I made a
Yeah.
very conscious decision of when I started promoting that I was not going to be selling my crowd as the attraction. I was selling the music, and that was it. And I've actually turned down gigs because of that, where they decided to change how they were going to promote the night. There was one guy who was just kind of doing this. It was always very much just plain text on a black background. It was really very minimal, and that was awesome. I'm like, yeah, I'm totally down to DJ with you. And the event that I came on, they started working with someone who promotes a lot of the fetish dance parties here, and they completely changed the look. It was like a latex suit with a woman in a space thing. We're doing all this, and this. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not good with this. And it's like, well, we're just spitballing ideas. I'm like, yeah, and I'm saying I don't like this idea. And they're like, well, and then one guy came back. It's like, well, it's my money. If you don't like it, just don't DJ. I'm like, all right, fair enough. I'm not DJing, and just walked away. And they couldn't believe that I just walk away. And I'm like, I don't need the night. Like, I got a day job. I don't have to do anything I don't want to do. It's not that I'm feeding myself on a night. And if you really think my sense of morals and ethics can be bought out for 2 hours of DJing and $60, like, come on, you gotta know me better than that.
Yeah.
They do now.
And that was the very reason why we chose to put cats on our
Like, who
flyers.
doesn't like cats?
I mean, half the internet was invented for cats. Like, let's be real here. Cats and porn.
I feel like the flyer thing is probably context dependent too, because you have, like, within the club itself, you have sort of a normative understood value system where that kind of thing is okay. But once the promotion is all a woman exposing herself for the the hidden viewer, like, the sort of male gaze kind of comes into that, where it's like we're on display for you to look at us. Whereas it's, once you take the context out of just a flyer on the internet that everybody can look at, and within the shared cultural space, that becomes like a completely different scenario.
Nothing is devoid of context. It's part of the problem, right? You can't take a pretty picture without understanding where that picture came from and what that picture is saying within the context of your culture. And 2019, if you're putting scantily clad women on your poster, you're telling your clientele, this is what you're selling. I don't care what you say, what genres you tag on there, what your fucking DJ name is. You can be as pretentious as me and call yourself Batty Von Bats. And the moment I put a woman in PVC on my flyer, I'm no longer selling my music and what I do. I'm selling, come out and try to fuck a chick like that. And I do not want to do that to anybody that comes into my night. I want people to come out to my night and feel safe and know that if someone does something wrong, the entire crew is going to have your back and not theirs. We're going to go at them and go at them hard.
Trey, do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, not really a lot that I haven't expressed before.
Okay.
I mean, I generally agree with the sentiment. I guess the only caveats is I do see the value and importance of things like burlesque events and fetish events and stuff like that. But it is very dependent on how you're advertising it and who you're advertising it to, because those are valid forms of expression, and there are people who get joy out of being involved in that. But at the same point, if you're just selling what is a standard dance night and putting that on it, it has a different subtext than if you're selling this specifically is a burlesque event or this specifically is a fetish event. And those events usually have some manner of protection around the performers as well. So it's not just anybody who's dressed in a certain way is targeted by anyone who happens to patronize the event. This is part of the show. They are doing this because they enjoy it, and you will enjoy it in a safe and consensual manner and not with this sort of intent of trying to get
laid. But I would pick that same fight with the fetish community. I think the fetish community is some of the worst abusers of this idea. Like the number of fetish events where it's supposed to be a celebration of sexuality and it's still designed for a heterosexual male gaze where the women are the commodity for the men. Like the fetish community talks good game. They don't sell it that way though.
That's true. And
I think it's dependent on where you are.
Yeah. My main issue when it comes to the fetish scene and what I'm used to with the more, I guess, the fetish events that I would be respectful of, they're typically more private, invite only or membership only. And they're not just a thing out in the public where they have rented out a club space and they do floggings for any comers that want to come by. Those are usually the ones where they're more selling that sex, selling that opportunity to get with that sexy dominatrix. And the flyers usually are exclusively female performers, even though there are plenty of male performers within the fetish scene, and it would be nice to see more diversity in that being shown. But yeah, I agree with you on some of the fetish events that choose to host. Basically, I don't consider them fetish events. They're more public fetish-themed events, and I have less respect for those in general.
See, and it's funny too, because with fetish, there was a lot of crossover between goth nights and fetish nights at one time. Because I know in New York, there was definitely events that kind of crossed over where it could attract both crowds. It was that way in Toronto to a degree, but I think there's less of that now where people into fetish aren't necessarily part of the goth community, or some are, but there's not a lot of overlap anymore because the fetish scene isn't about music. So I just spun a fetish party last night, and it was interesting because I thought, wow, they're either going to really like this because it's something they haven't heard before, or they're going to fucking hate it, and I'm just going to get the hook off the stage. So it went over well, and it was a really well done, well run night. So the fetish scene, though, again, it's about sex and not necessarily about music. This is where there's pretty heavy rules straight out of the gate so that people are safe and can feel safe. The way they ran things last night, they had folks with armbands that you could be able to flag if there was an issue. Like, people were being watched over. There's no photography at these kinds of events for the security of the patrons. There were male and female performers. And again, not really a goth crowd. If anything, it was more about the burner community than the goth crowd. But I think it depends a lot on who's running what as far as the fetish nights go. Personally, if I hadn't been DJing, I wouldn't have gone because the fetish thing is not my thing. And the main driver of getting me out to a night is going to be about the music overall.
Though I would say your background in dark ambient and stuff probably could serve you well for those sorts of nights, since, like you said, the better scene is not about the music, but the music is about helping enhance the ambiance and the scene. So the dark ambient things are especially good for some of the slower scenes. And yeah, you can get some of the harsher industrial with some of the more active scene type things. But yeah, I think a good mix of that kind of more mood music that just sort of flows into a background, musical wallpaper does fit that sort of event better than the more club focused, the music is right in your face type of event.
Yeah, because as a DJ, I really hate being on the stage because at events, DJs should not be the main focus. Like, the funny thing about being a DJ is that you're there to create an atmosphere, and people shouldn't really have to notice you unless there's a fuck up. When there's a fuck up, that's when everybody's like, "Oh, the DJ." But otherwise, it shouldn't be this rock star DJ mentality, which I think is just awful.
It's not
So, but I
EDM.
want to be able to be there and provide a soundtrack for whatever the theme of the night is.
Yeah, I generally enjoy it when the DJ, even when I was DJing, when we were available, but not necessarily a performance artist on display. Where you could
Right.
you have a really clear view of the crowd. That's key because you have to see how you're affecting the people, so you can have that conversation and adjust what you're doing to meet the needs of the crowd. But at the same point, it's good for you to have that back channel where it's easy for the crowd to not necessarily see you, but come up to and interact with you, so you can get a feel for them in that conversation where they're making requests or making commentary on how the night's progressing. And I do like that back and forth, but it doesn't need to be a centralized, I am the DJ, bow down before me.
Exactly.
Well, let's stick on the DJ thing for a second, because if we have time, maybe we can circle back around to fashion. But I'm interested. Let's just start with sort of your, I guess, philosophy of DJing. I know, Mistress McCutchan, I saw your status the other day about playing, which you just referenced, playing a brand new song and not being sure how that would go over. What are your kind of general rules about what music you play and what people request, and pet peeves and that kind of thing?
Well, I generally don't take requests, but when I do, my crowd tends to ask for really good things. I'll find that somebody will come up and ask me for something that's within my wheelhouse, and I'll be like, "Oh, that's a great idea." And then I'll be happy to entertain that request. Otherwise, I find that a lot of people don't approach me or talk to me much. So I just kind of go about doing my thing. I don't want to be predictable.
Mm.
And I want people to be guessing, like, what's going to come next. I want to spin your favorite songs that you didn't even know you loved, because half of the time I find that people walk out of my night, or they will come up to me after my set is done and say, "I have no idea what you played, but I loved all of it." And when I see a crowd in the middle of a dance floor grabbing their phone and holding it up, they're Shazamming my set. And that's a massive compliment.
Yeah.
My reference to playing a new song that just came out yesterday is because my regular DJ partner for the party that I do, called Prophecy, DJ The Wasteland, is also an ex-New Yorker, and he absolutely prides himself on playing the newest of the new. And the last time we spun together, he was like, "Yeah, I think the oldest song that I'm playing tonight is a year old." So he's always trying to be on the cutting edge. I tend to go with very new or really obscure that has been dug out and ripped from vinyl and then cleaned up through the DAW and then brought in to my DJ equipment. So I want to keep people guessing and to get them moving on the dance floor and go, "Holy shit, what is this song?" Because when people come up and they're going, "What is this?" because they can't find it on Shazam, I know I'm doing it right.
Is there still a big audience for that? You get a lot of people dancing to all the brand new stuff, or is that like is it separated into, like, these are the nights where you hear Dead Stars a million times or whatever it is kind of thing.
Like there is no future pop at our nights.
Oh my God, yeah.
Like I don't. We have 8 DJs. I don't think any of us like future pop.
Okay.
I think I had said at one point that if I get sent to hell, my version of hell is going to be hearing Military Fashion Show on repeat.
There's a very large
God.
segment of bands that we just don't touch. You know, I think one of the things that we do well with our collective with Alter is that nobody can spin the sets that the DJs in Alter can in Toronto. Like nobody does what any of us do. Like when the Wasteland plays a set, that's a Wasteland set. When Vernal Trash plays a set, that's a Vernal Trash set. When Hate Muir plays a set, it's a Hate Muir set. When Dark Dave plays a set, it's Dark Dave. When it's Alias Synesthesia, it's Alias Synesthesia. When it's myself, it's me. When it's Mistress McCutchan, it's Mistress McCutchan. Like we're all very different. I tend to find in a lot of places, you know, the song selection is really similar. And again, it's not that I necessarily dislike the songs that are being played. I just don't need to hear 4 hours of the same thing. Like I went out to the club when I was 19 to hear new and different things, and I don't think that's changed. I think people still want to hear that, especially just from the idea of rejuvenating the scene. I don't think it's unreasonable for someone to assume that a 40-year-old song wouldn't necessarily speak to a 19-year-old today. Like and again, that's not to say that Bela Lugosi's Dead is not an undeniable classic track, but that song is 40 years old. Like it was released in 79. You know, if you're going to be playing music that old, find something different. I don't want to be, playing the classic rock of, the goth and industrial scene. Like, for God's sakes, Frontline Assembly just released an album 3 months ago. The only person I've heard play a song from that damn album is me. And it's a good album. Like, if you want to play Frontline Assembly, play Frontline Assembly. Cubanate just dropped a new album this week. Great friggin' album. If you're going to play Cubanate, at least do it then and now. Like, here's Oxyacetylene. Here's something from Colossus. Like, let's show you the progression of what's happened in the last 25 years for this band. They do some fantastic things.
Yeah.
And there's ways to tie things together. And I think we do a fantastic job. I think Mr. McCutchan and I are very similar about requests. I might be even more militant than she is about requests. Like the Wasteland and I are basically like, yeah, no, screw your requests. But half the times I'll have somebody come up making requests to me and it's like, yeah, can you play something from Leatherstrip? And then I'll play a Leatherstrip track the next song. And 3 songs later, the person goes, well, you haven't played my request yet. I'm like, I literally played it the next song. But I didn't play a track you expected, or I didn't play the FLA track you're expecting. Like, I have a plan. I like heavy, hard music, and I like local bands. I play a lot of local bands. We all do. Let's be honest. Like our collective's pretty good that way. We support our local scene. So, if you only want to hear Plasticity or Assimilate or Friday I'm in Love or Closer or whatever, I don't care.
Or one of the 3 Sisters of
fucking
Mercy
Cities and
songs
Dust
that they ever wrote, because they only wrote 3.
Yeah.
Oh, of course it was going to come up.
I knew that was going to come up. I was like, why is it always they're going to play Susie and the Banshees, they're going to play Cities and Dust? And then we started the hashtag More Than Dust, and I was just like, but it's true. It's like, so I'll go and play some random B-side, or I think the last time I played Susie and the Banshees, I played, they did a Kraftwerk cover called The Hall of Mirrors.
Good song.
And people were going, and I'm like, yeah, there's more.
That's a good cover.
Do you feel like there's enough of a robust scene there to support the people who are like the traditionalists and the people who are interested in the new stuff or in that thing and this kind of thing? Or do you get because right now in Chicago, we do have, like, there are trad goth nights and there are like newer bands that are goth nights, and there's more industrial stuff, and there's the, Nocturnal's the big one, which you just get a whole bunch of different stuff played. But I can remember at various times, depending on what was out there and what was available, there was all kinds of drama about people complaining about, the scene is dying, but they would never go out, or they'd go out and all they would do is complain about it, but never actually try and do anything to change anything, to see what they wanted to see. Do you guys run into that there, or is it more of a like, do you not have?
I don't think we have the issue because we don't go to nights we don't like. Like, seriously, if you're not going to do something interesting, we're not going to go out. So it means it's not a problem. I found that a retro night for me is 6 vodka 7s and I can have fun. I don't like necessarily pounding back 6 vodka 7s and going out and having a good time. Get a little messy.
But complaining is a national pastime here. So we were always going to have complainers, but the people that do come out, it's funny because the scene it's sizable. There are enough people in Toronto. I mean, Toronto's a fairly large city. It recently surpassed Chicago in population. And
that's pretty big.
There's enough to go around, and there's definitely little subsections of things happening where there's a trad goth night, there's a more industrial leaning EBM night, there's this, there's that. People follow DJs. There's certain DJs I'm not sure why they continue to follow, because if you go to a club and you haven't been for a while and the DJ is basically playing the same set list that they were playing a decade ago, that's pathetic.
Yeah.
Yeah, like some of the stuff you go to, in my experience, it feels like you're going to like the saddest high school reunion of all time. It's like all the unpopular kids got together and did their own high school reunion because they didn't get invited to the one with all the popular kids went to. But that's how a lot of the nights feel to me. And there are some good nights, and a lot of these nights I feel like that to me are more popular than my night, but I don't want to be popular. I want to be good. I figure if I'm good, popular will come eventually. Yeah. And if not, I got a day job, so I can still pay my rent, so I don't care.
That's what's freeing about having a regular source of income, is that, DJing is not our bread and butter. I don't rely on DJing to pay rent. So it allows for a lot of creative freedom, and to say, no, I don't want to play that song. I don't care if 10 people want to hear it. They can go fuck themselves because I'm going to play this. So I've never said that.
Well,
but
I've outright told good.
Because there's stuff that we won't
I was
play.
Say, I've actually told people
what was that?
I won't play that, and because I don't have it, and they'll ask me why I don't have it. I go, because I don't like it. And like, it's like they have this look of absolute horror on their face. I'm like, I didn't say it's a bad song. I said I don't like it. Like, I can defend the artistic quality of V&V Nation, and I hate V&V Nation, but I can defend why it's a good song. I just won't never play it because I shouldn't say I won't ever play it. If you pay me enough money, I'll play it for sure, or tell me a really good story. But like, it's not the kind of thing that, you come up with requests. Like, people requested Combi Christ from us, and everybody at Altar is like, yeah, no, we don't play Combi Christ. No, we don't support people like that. And people are like, I can't believe you'd say that. And I'm like, I can't believe you would expect us to say anything else.
Yeah. I'm still honestly
exactly.
I'm still shocked every once in a while I'll see somebody post about going to a Combi Christ show or whoever, and I'm just like, maybe think about what music you're listening to a little bit more carefully.
Right.
I did want to get your opinions on dress codes though, because it seems like, at least anecdotally, it's become more and more common. I know there have been a few clubs for a long time that just have dress codes, or invite only, or you have to be brought in by someone that's a regular a few times before you can go in on your own. Do you have as DJs and promoters, how do you feel about that kind of thing?
Yeah.
Well, I'll start on this one. For me, it depends on the event. when we do altar on Fridays, it's pretty casual. So you can show up in your pajamas if you want to just come out and hear some music, and that's totally fine. The club that I got my start at was over in New York called Mother. They always had a dress code so that way random people weren't just coming in to gawk at the crowd. When I've done specialty events, like when I did Salon Noir, I brought in Sex Gang Children, I brought in Jarbeau, I brought in David J, I brought in Dead Fly Ensemble, and they were super themed events where there was absolutely a dress code because it was adding to the whole affair. It was adding to the theme. And people got really annoyed about it and were like, well, that's elitist. And I'm like, really? Well, first of all, it's a dress-up party because I think dress-up parties are fun and it's part of the theme. So why can't we all sort of participate in this theme? And I think it's about being appropriate. Like, if you're being invited to a wedding, you're going to probably wear a specific outfit. If you've been invited to go to the beach, you're probably going to wear a specific outfit. If you're going to an event that is sort of this Victorian Gothic thing and there's going to be these kinds of performances involved, you should wear a specific kind of thing. And it's not to say, oh, you need to go and spend money on a look. You just need to be creative, or at the very bare minimum, come dressed in black. And that was very much a rule back home in New York, was at the very least, basic black is required. And if you go to any of these sort of mainstream clubs, there are dress codes there too, where you can't wear sneakers or you can't wear like trucker hats or whatever. So I think having a dress code for specific types of events is good. It's meant to be fun. But if you're just running sort of your regular night at the pub where you're coming out to hear some good music, I don't care if you want to wear blue jeans, whatever. You're here for music. That's cool. Let's have a conversation about music.
Yeah, I kind of follow in the same line there with Mistress McCutchan. I think low barrier of entry events are really important. For a club night to be successful, you basically got to be doing 100% turnover of your crowd every year to 2 years. So if you have this massive high barrier of entry to everything, you're never going to get that changeover because you're never going to get people who can meet the standard coming in for the first time, right? So that's definitely problematic. But the uniform is important, especially when you start doing things that are a little bit more risque, or a little bit more pricey. If I'm doing an event that it's got a $40 ticket on it and the drinks start at $20, you better be able to afford something other than a pair of running shoes. You can't afford to come into my night. And yeah, is that elitist? Yeah, it is. But that's okay. I don't think being an elitist is necessarily a bad thing. The idea is to try to pull everybody up. Like if you're an elitist and you're keeping people down, you're an asshole. But I think there's a degree of saying, hey, there is a higher standard that can be met and make it something that's achievable. It's there. And as long as your city or you're promoting events that can hit all different price points, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I think the night you DJ'd on Saturday, Mr. McCutchan, was a $30 door.
40.
40? Okay. 30 in advance, 40 at the door.
Yep.
Right. Yeah, that should have a dress code. That's a very specific type thing. But if you don't want to pay $40 on a Saturday night, come out on a Friday night for free and come out and hang out with us in the basement of a pub. The music's just as good.
Yeah.
But it's a very different event. It's a casual event.
Exactly.
Yeah, for me, I mean, well, I'm generally more into just making things inclusive and all of that. So I'm typically against dress codes, but when there's enough of a variety of events happening, when it's not a small town that just has the one club, then I am a lot more lenient. As long as there's something out there that people can go to without having to, have to dress up to the nines or have to wear a very specific dress code. As long as there's some outlet for those people, then other nights, other varieties can be more specific, can have better dress codes, can have higher ticket prices, whatever. It worries me when it comes to small towns. But I did come up through a fair number of small town scenes before coming into Chicago, so I got used to there's one place in town where you can go to hear any sort of goth industrial type music, and it would horrify me if that was the only club in town and they mandated everybody has to wear some sort of really nice black whatever attire. But when there is a variety of events, then great. Give opportunities for everybody, because it is nice to have that ability to go to a safe space where you're going to expect a certain type of crowd, and you don't have to worry about a random person coming in with totally wrong ideas of what the norms are.
Right. But, and like you're saying, I mean, I would agree. I think you have to have a different option, because there needs to be, if the sustainability of a scene relies on new people getting involved, you have to have a place where people can show up for the first time at a goth club, looking, awkward or out of character or whatever, but they're like, hey, I like the music and I want to get started. There has to be some place for them to do that. We have to have the ability to bring them in and have it be a safe space where they're not just going to be dismissed or snarled at or quizzed on Sisters B-sides to get in or whatever, so that they can just kind of dip their toes in and see if it's something that they're interested in or not.
What I've found works pretty well is that if these more premium type events, if they're done as like a gathering of the tribes, where you have like your 4 or 5 different club nights or groups that do their things, and then you do this one really big thing where everybody can come together, that's where those premium events where you have that higher ticket price, or the dress codes and stuff like that, that's when they tend to work in my experience.
Mm. Do you have non club events going on there, like cemetery meetups or house parties and stuff like that too?
I know that there's a goth meetup where people can go somewhere where there isn't a loud club environment, so that they can sit down and actually have conversations.
Yeah, but
And I think there tends to be a lot of younger people that go.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
go to them, so I couldn't speak to that. But
yeah,
I know that there's that, and there's an annual goth picnic that happens in the park.
yeah, the goth meetup tends to be built around meeting up before going to a specific event, though. Like, it's usually built around going
Interesting.
to 1 or 2 events like once a month, and that's very much what it's designed to do.
So the scene there is very much about the music,
or being seen.
right?
Yes. The other non-club related event that I would say is a good social opportunity would be Bazaar of the Bazaar, which is a marketplace that's hosted by a clothing designer that's local to us called Plastic Wrap. And they have all sorts of different vendors selling everything that you can think of, from like art to jewelry to clothing to books. And it's free entry, so folks can come and check things out and go shop and socialize. There tends to be a food vendor there as well, so that's also a thing that people can go and meet other people and hang out.
Mm.
But I think a lot of what happens in the scene does revolve around club related things, because it's about people want to go out dancing, they want to hear music, and they want to go and take some good selfies so that they've got Instagram content.
That's interesting.
Yeah, there is definitely a lot of that. Probably in the 90s we would have called those people posers.
Yeah.
But part of the thing is that space is at such a cost premium in Toronto. Trying to do anything outside of stuff like that is tough. You know, I know there's always people that keep saying, well, we want to do all these different things. Like we want more all ages stuff, or we want stuff not in bars. And every time someone tries to do something, just nobody shows up. You know, I've DJ'd a few 16 plus raves coming out and doing industrial, like really driving electronic industrial and industrial metal. And, you know, it's none of the scene people that keep saying they want this coming out. You know, a Toronto band that's kind of got back together the last few years. They did an all ages show at the Mod Club, and they actively pushed it as all ages. I shared it out. A bunch of people shared it out, and you know the show was done by 11 o'clock. And looking around that room, I think there may have been one person under 25 in the room. So, wow. You know, people keep saying they want this, but nobody shows up, and that is unfortunately a very common issue I find in Toronto. There's a lot of people that like to talk, and a lot of people that like to do.
Yeah, there's a lot of talkers.
We're just lucky we found a bunch of doers to do stuff with.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely it.
Yeah.
I mean, we're cultivating our crowd, and people do understand the types of things that we spin. And yeah, those are the folks that are going to realize that, oh yeah, this is the thing I want to do, or this is the thing I'm looking forward to. Because, for example, the last party that I did, Prophecy, was in December. And then my DJ partner, The Wasteland, went out to one of the Goth meetups, and apparently like a bunch of people went up to him and were like, so when's the next Prophecy? And I was like, really? Okay, well, that's cool. People want it. So let's give this a go. So finding a venue that'll support what we want to do is getting harder these days because there's less space. One of the big clubs that we had that was a pretty dedicated alternative goth bar was Nocturne. That closed in October. Then we lost Coalition in April. And as the spaces are getting far and fewer in between, it gets harder to plan out and schedule things and go, okay, well, I need to find a venue. I need to do this, and getting people to come out to a new venue is a challenge.
Yeah, and people have to start being willing to put some effort in too. You know, there's a lot of people that say they want, you know, the sun and the moon and the sky, and won't take anything less. You know, I remember years ago when one of the venues closed down in Toronto, a big thread about saying, well, what do people want for a venue? Like, well, you know, we don't want any cover. We want a place where we can sit down. We want a dance floor. We want to be right on 24-hour transit, preferably a subway, no cover, cheap drinks. Well, we actually found that.
Wow.
And people still won't come out. Like we're growing. It's and again, we're growing in the right way. Like we're growing very much word of mouth, and it's and I'm very hopeful. Like we're right where I kind of expected to be based on me doing the same kind of model in Ottawa, for what we're doing with our Friday night here. But it's funny, like people, like you have a destination. This is a legit underground hidden space. Yeah, you got to go through another place to go in, and it's downstairs. It's an unmarked building, you know, or not through an unmarked door. But when you open it up, there's always this green light and this
I love that
smoke machine going, and we got crazy DJ lights, and there's seating, so you can sit down and chill. The pub that we're in the basement, the pub has amazing food, and whatever your dietary restrictions are, they can accommodate them. You know, it doesn't matter whether, yeah, like even my girlfriend, who is a gluten-free pescatarian because she's got Hashimoto's, she can get food there, and the food is good, and it's affordable, and the drinks are affordable, and the staff cares, and the regulars like us. Like the regulars at the bar. Like
wow.
this is a sports bar. They're like, yeah, they're cool people. They come in, they spend money, they're nice. You know, it's not uncommon for people just come in and just kind of join the party. They'll walk downstairs, use a bathroom, and then just hear this crazy sound coming from this unmarked door, and let's kind of open the
Yeah.
door. And you know, sometimes they look at it and go, this is weird, but half the time they go, this is kind of cool, and they come in and they're coming back, and it may not be every Friday, but they'll come back in, they'll dance, and they're generally good people. You know, in 10 months we've had one relatively minor incident. That's not too bad.
Yeah, I mean, it was rather endearing. One of the blonde bartenders upstairs put on a t-shirt with this like cross on it and wore black eyeliner one night, and I was like, "Aw."
Yeah, that's adorable.
It was very adorable.
So sorry if I'm not interjecting as much. I keep forgetting I'm doing a show and not listening to a cat versus bat podcast episode. I keep being like, oh yeah, this is good. Oh wait, no, yeah, we're doing a podcast here. Cool.
But this is what cat versus bat is all about. It's about having this conversation that we happen to record and we think we're interesting, and sometimes other people do too, and we just suck you right into our world.
That's it. Yeah, our moms think we're cool.
Yeah.
Oh dear. Oh dude, I hope my mom doesn't listen to the podcast. I swear way too much.
Oh, my family does. Both my parents do. They
really?
love it.
I know, it's so weird.
Yeah,
it's weird.
Yeah, my parents they talk about it. They have outright said they like the fact that we're willing to take a stand and be political and be active and say the things we are saying, because I think it's important to be said. They may not agree with everything we say, but yeah, both my mom and my dad listen to the podcast every week, and they may not necessarily like the music, but they like our passion, and they think we're doing something really important.
I've disappointed my parents so much. I feel like if they listened to my podcast, they'd probably die of a heart attack. But that's just my situation. All right. Well, you brought up politics. I mean, we've got a few minutes left. Let's see if we can close out on this briefly, because I guess I've sort of been inferring from some of your Facebook commentary that there must be some faction of either local or people you know of that are trying to push away or push against the idea that goth is political or that it should have anything to say about that. So I mean, I guess you could take this in any number of directions, but just sort of your views on, well, is that a thing, and just your views on like why goth is political, why that's important, where that crosses over with your community, that kind of stuff.
Well, I'll start with this. It's the goth scene, so there's drama.
Yeah.
Because it's the goth scene.
Goths. Yeah.
And there's no way that goth is not political. Springing from the roots of punk rock, there is no way this cannot be political. As a creative form of expression, art has something to say. And in this day and age, it is absolutely political. There is definitely a point of view that is typical of the goth scene, or at least, and if it's changing, then maybe I don't want to be part of this goth scene.
No, then we'll fight it.
I mean, growing up and getting into this, it was always this open-mindedness. It was about accepting people and accepting variety and diversity. So the fact that things are starting to shift and we're living in really interesting times where people like Trump get elected, where Doug Ford is the premier of Ontario, that a literal Nazi ran for mayor of Toronto, like shit like that happening, there is no way that you can't stay awake and pay attention to what's going on.
Yeah. I kind of follow the belief that all art is political. By simply putting a message out there with your art, you're trying to affect the world. You're either trying to affect change, or you're advocating for a certain type of behavior or belief. Whether that's passive or active is irrelevant. But it's what you do. That's what art's designed to do. I think goth and industrial music, by their origins, are actively political. You can't look at anything from, the first Throbbing Gristle album up until today and not find political messages in the industrial scene. And same with the goth scene. Like, there's actively political things. Like, you can't tell me when Eldritch is singing a song called Dominion Mother Russia in the height of the Cold War, he's not trying to send a political message.
Or Vision Thing,
Vision,
or Coil,
yeah,
or Ministry. Like know your history. If you are saying things like, well, goth isn't political, then you clearly don't know anything about the music you claim to listen to.
Yeah. And if you're coming in saying, I don't want my scene to be political, you're not a goth. You're not part of the industrial scene. You're a fucking poser.
So let me. I just got an email a couple days ago to the podcast, and essentially he wasn't trying to make an argument or anything. He was just trying to explain his perspective. But the argument he made was that political to him, and I think you kind of answered this based on talking about art, but to him, something being political directly relates to either policy creation or an election or a politician or that kind of thing. And then
but even that,
yeah.
But even that, there's capital G, Antifa, Vision Thing. These are all directly speaking to or about somebody. Like, for fuck's sakes, I released a song called Punch a Nazi on my label when I had it. The band ended up being on a bunch of alt-right target lists.
Oh, wow.
Like, this is political. You can't tell me that industrial is not political when tons of people turned their back on Klaus Larson when Klaus came out.
Yeah.
You can't tell me that this music is not political when you look at everything that Throbbing Gristle and Coil went through.
So let me ask you
this. For fuck's sakes, Depeche Mode released a song called People Are People.
Yeah.
Ministry, I think probably the smartest thing I've ever said about the scene is Ministry's Every Day It's Halloween is essentially Shylock's speech from the Merchants of Venice. Getting people to try to see the innate humanity of the goth culture. Just because we dress weird doesn't mean we don't have feelings. Like, that's the entire screed of the Shylock speech about why he was seeking justice, despite the fact he was being portrayed as a tricky Jew, because of course he was. It was Shakespeare, right?
Well, I mean, and that we may have a nihilistic view, but again, talk to somebody who's in the goth scene and you'll find that they're fairly happy people, because I mean, we're aware of what's going on, and we want to be able to still enjoy the best life that we can. And if you're going to turn a blind eye to what's going on in the world, I think it's just incredibly foolish. And again, because of the day and age that we're in and the speed of how information is coming at us, I mean, it's funny because today I'm wearing my Brett Kavanaugh shirt that says not Supreme. I'm wearing my clean version because the other one says Supreme Cunt on it.
Yeah.
And walking around with the word cunt on my shirt, it depends on what day it is where I can handle wearing that. But otherwise, it's an important message. That feels like it happened 50 years ago.
Yeah.
Because so much other shit is going on that it's like, holy fuck, how are we going to deal with all this and what's going to happen next? And and by the way, check out what's happening in the South, because they want to take these people's rights away.
Yeah.
And especially coming into June, this is the month of Pride. And 50 years ago, that first Pride parade was the Stonewall riot. And if people don't know their history and they don't know what's going on and they're not paying attention, and you don't want to be open-minded to what's going on, like to who your people are, who our tribe is, there's no place for the right in this scene. There just isn't.
Yeah, and there's no place to be neutral.
Correct.
If you have enough privilege for this to be neutral and it doesn't affect you, then you are part of the problem.
Yep.
And I'll say that without reservation. And I get the need to blow off Steve. I get the want to go out and just forget the problems of the world. But I think you can do that, or at least heal and recharge and reinvigorate by going to a place and listen to these messages and know you're not alone and understand that you can make a change in the world by just making it safe for a queer kid to come out and dance. Like that's as political as I want you to be, is to be able to say, yeah, no, trans people are real people. Muslims are real people. Persons of color are welcome in our scene. Like that's as political as I want you to be. And I'm aghast that that's still a political statement, but it is. And
right.
I don't want things to happen the way they are. I don't want to see Proud Boys showing up at my night like apparently happened at another night a couple of weeks ago.
Wow.
Like if Proud Boys show up at my night and I see them, the first thing I'm doing is putting on Punch a Nazi.
Yeah.
And it's going to be like, I see you. Let me make you feel really fucking uncomfortable. And if I can do that with just words, great. If I need to use a beer bottle, so be it.
Oh, Justin is in the background. He's got an interesting point to bring up. Justin frequently does some production for us when we do the podcast, and sometimes he has something to say, but he doesn't have a microphone. So, but then again, Justin's got plenty to say. It's when you get him going. But the note that he wanted to bring up is Goth was originally called positive punk.
Yes. Yeah.
And I was like, oh shit, you're right. That is true, because we did not use the term goth until a certain point in time. I mean, I remember being called death rock and death punk and all of that, and positive punk. Andy Sex Gang himself had used the term.
Yeah.
And he's bringing up that point. Now, you're not allowed to talk anymore because you don't have a microphone. He's done.
Get him out. No, I've always...
Just say yes, mistress, and smile.
I've always been confounded by, and I know people personally, and not to put, maybe I should preface it by saying this. I know a number of Goths who are Christians that do not believe or act like this, but I do know and have known people that call themselves Goth, that dress Goth. They, wear men wearing makeup and skirts and that kind of thing, that are part of the scene, and because of their Christian belief, will go online and say transphobic things or say homophobic things or, all that kind of stuff. And I just I've never understood how you can rectify that sort of cognitive dissonance of the scene that you're part of and the people that are part of that scene, and still holding on to those ideologies that are so hateful to the people that are in that scene and built that scene. It's mind-blowing to me how somebody can live like that.
Yeah.
Well, hearing that, they're not real Christians. because didn't Christ hang out with like the lepers and prostitutes and all sorts of people that were quote unquote undesirable?
Yep.
Well, I mean,
So, I mean, if you're a real Christian, you should be reaching out to your fellow man or woman, you know?
Or
Like, so when I hear stuff like that where you're going to cut it down, I'm like, well, that's all bullshit.
yeah,
You're not a real Christian. I'm sorry. I was raised Catholic and I've had a lot of deprogramming in my time
Yeah.
after that. But yeah, no, that's not acceptable.
yeah, no, I
mean,
agree that. Sorry, go ahead, Count.
I guess my problem with that is the issue with Christianity and the Bible, and this sort of manifests in the fact that there's how many hundreds of denominations of Christianity, is that the way that the Bible is written and works, it can kind of you can use it to justify any pre-existing belief, because you can just apply any sort of hermeneutical framework that you want to show, well, this part of the Bible supports this and this part supports that. And, or, there's certainly Christians that would make that argument. I have Christian friends that make that argument about, if you don't follow the example of Jesus as a countercultural icon, as the, these things and those things. And, even Jesus, I think that's fine, but even I still have problems with his sort of theology and philosophy, and the like the golden rule, or the do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It's not even necessarily the good version of that, because it should be more like do unto others as they would have done unto themselves kind of thing, because you're not respecting who they want to be or who they are. You're respecting or you're treating them how you want to be treated, which is not necessarily how they want to be treated. So I don't necessarily I think Christianity is enough of a Rorschach test that you can justify any belief you want through it. But that's just my view.
Yeah, that's very cafeteria Christian. You just pick off the menu what you want to follow, what you don't want to follow. And I mean, if your motivation to be a good person is because you believe a man in the sky is judging you and that he's watching if you do something bad, then I don't know how you're living your life. I mean, that was an argument that, well, if you don't have religion, then how will you have morals? And yet, as an atheist, I think I'm doing a pretty decent job living a decent life.
It is,
and not being too much of a dick.
Well, it is horrifying to me the number of times I've heard Christians say, if God doesn't exist, then what's to stop me from going out in the street and killing and raping people? And I'm like, if that thought even enters your mind, that is what you might do if you found out God doesn't exist, you have some serious problems beyond
Fuck
religion.
yes, no
right,
kidding.
well, I've actually got two counterpoints to what you said back there before the count.
Yeah, please.
You mentioned the Bible kind of being able to kind of pick and choose, and that's true up until a point. But one of the biggest flaws I find a lot of people are doing with the Bible is they're removing the context of when it was written. Context matters. Shitty translations matter. So there's a lot there you've got to think about.
Yeah. I agree.
The other thing I want to kind of point out was I think the golden rule is superior to what you think would be a better rule, simply because there are a significant number of people out there that really don't have empathy or sympathy. They don't get that others are actually fully formed people with their own beliefs and understandings. And I think that while, yes, you can do that, and I think everybody in this podcast can do it, I think probably a significant number of our listeners can do that, there are people I know out there who actually cannot put themselves in someone else's shoes. Like, they just don't get that other people aren't NPCs in their heroic story.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the brilliance of the golden rule is that it's not perfect, but it's pretty much as good as you're going to get in every situation, because you can't fully put yourself in everybody else's shoes. And I think if you have a high degree of empathy and you have a high degree of sympathy, you're able to do that. I think when you look at people that are obviously sociopathic, your Stephen Millers, your Donald Trumps, your Dick Cheneys, the best you can get out of them is to realize that, maybe if I punch that person, they'll be unhappy because I'd be unhappy if I got punched.
Right.
And there are a significant number of people out there. That's the best you'll ever be able to hope from them.
Oh my God, I can hear your cat.
Yes, cat is being very loud. Let me go get him.
That's not a big deal. We're about
both
to
of my
wrap up.
Yeah, this has been great. I've got 2 cats at my feet right now who are just kind of snuggly. So, yeah.
I got one.
I don't know where my cats are.
Yeah, I got one that was laying nicely getting pets in front of me, and then the cat decided that he needed to sing the song of his people.
Right. Because he knows you're recording.
I think he just more missed me.
Yeah. That's the same with my cats in the morning. It's like, we haven't seen you in 8 hours. We're going to scream at you until you pet us for a prolonged period of time.
Yeah, it was 48 hours for these guys.
Right.
Oh.
Oof. That's brutal.
Ollie was here.
Oh, okay.
They weren't left alone, but they didn't see me. So obviously they were not fed and not loved. It was terrible.
Mistress McCutchan, Batty Von Bats, thank you both so much for coming on. It was a pleasure to get to chat with you guys. I hope we can do it again.
Likewise. Yeah, we'll have you guys on our podcast next time, so we can forget what show it is.
Right, exactly.
So for anyone, I guess I forgot to do this in the beginning, but let people know where they can find both your podcast and any DJ pages, that kind of thing.
Well, you can find the podcast through the Belfry Network. Hey-o. How convenient. You can find it anywhere where you listen to your podcasts, through iTunes, through Google Play. We like when you share, and subscribe it, so please listen. Our DJ pages, I am Mistress McCutchan on Facebook, and I am on Instagram as well under Mistress McCutchan.
Same here. I'm on Facebook as Batty Von Bats, Instagram, Twitter. You can find the podcast on Facebook and Twitter as well. And we're both on Mixcloud. So mixcloud.com /Batty Von Bats for me. I've got a whole bunch up there. Nothing that new. I'm sorry, folks.
I'll make sure I have links to all of that in the show notes. So if you're listening on your phone or on the website, swipe up, left, right, or down, whatever it is, depending on your device, and you can follow the links to those. So thank you guys again. It was a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you very much for you.
Thank you so much.
The preceding program is a member of the Belfry, a network of blogs, podcasts, and videos for the darkly inclined. Go to thebelfry.rip for more information.